Today, we are deconstructing two of the absolute titans of strategic thought, Sun Tzu and Carl von Clausewitz. Now, their ideas have shaped everything from military history to modern business. But here's the fascinating part. Their core philosophies are almost complete opposites. So let's start with Sun Tzu. This one quote, right here, gets to the very heart of everything he believed. For him, the greatest victory isn't won on the battlefield with swords and arrows. It's won in the mind. The real goal is psychological dominance, to make your opponent give up before the fight even starts. It's an incredibly elegant, almost artistic way of looking at conflict. And then you have Clausewitz. There's no poetry here, is there? This is just brutal, unflinching realism. He's basically saying that trying to be clever and avoid bloodshed is a nice idea, but it's a fantasy. In his world, war is, at its core, an act of violence. And if you're not ready to be ruthless, you're going to get destroyed by someone who is. And right there, that's the central tension we're going to explore. The mind versus pure, overwhelming force. So you see, this isn't just a history lesson about two old generals. It's really about two competing philosophies of conflict that are just as relevant today as they were centuries ago. The question is, are you trying to win by outthinking your opponent or by simply outmuscling them? This chart lays it out perfectly. On one side, you have Sun Tzu, who sees conflict as a psychological chess match. Force is something you use only when you have to. The ideal is to avoid fighting at all. On the other side, you have Clausewitz. For him, conflict is a raw test of strength, where fighting is the main event, and it's almost always a long, grueling struggle. And this really highlights their different perspectives. Sun Tzu is giving you a handbook on the methods for winning, while Clausewitz is trying to understand the very nature of war itself. So you have to ask, why were their views so incredibly different? Well, it really all comes down to the worlds they lived in. Their personal experiences with war shaped everything they believed. Clausewitz, you have to remember, was forged in the fires of the Napoleonic Wars. I mean, this was a continent-spanning conflict that went on for decades. He saw with his own eyes that wars just kept escalating, that no single battle was ever truly the end. And that experience led him to his most famous insight, that war is not some separate event. It's just politics carried on with other means. For him, war was this continuous, brutal conversation. But Sun Tzu's world, it was completely different. The warring states of ancient China simply didn't have the resources for a long campaign. Just raising one army could bankrupt an entire state. So you couldn't afford to get bogged down. Victory had to be quick, it had to be decisive, and it had to be efficient. You get in, achieve your goal, and get out before the whole thing collapses. Okay, so this leads to a really crucial question. If you're going to attack, what are you actually aiming for? What's the real target? Both men had a name for this critical vulnerability, what Clausewitz called the center of gravity, but you guessed it, they identified completely different targets. So let's look at Clausewitz's idea of the Schwerpunkt, or center of gravity. I love this definition, the hub of all power and movement, on which everything depends. In his mind, every enemy has a core source of strength, a single point that holds everything else together, and your job is to find that point and hit it with everything you've got. And for him, these were real, tangible things. You know, it could be the enemy's main army, their capital city, or even something like public opinion or a key alliance. The strategy was simple. Identify that single, critical hub, and then direct all of your force, all of it, right at that spot until it breaks. Okay, so Clausewitz is focused on a physical or social hub that you can find on a map. But Sun Tzu, well, his target isn't on any map at all. That's right. Sun Tzu isn't trying to break the enemy's army. He's trying to break the enemy commander's will. He wants to so confuse, demoralize, and mislead his opponents that their will to even fight just evaporates. He wants them to defeat themselves. We can actually see this in two key Chinese concepts. A state in a good condition has Ji. It's orderly, stable, cohesive. Sun Tzu's entire strategy is designed to take that beautiful order and transform it into Luan, into chaos. The goal is to sow so much doubt and confusion that the enemy's society literally starts to break down from the inside. So how did they actually propose to achieve these very different goals? What were the tools in their respective toolkits? Sun Tzu's approach is this incredibly careful four-step process. It starts with Quan, a deep assessment of the situation. Then comes Shi, understanding every single factor at play. From there, you identify Shi, the absolute perfect moment to act, and only then do you develop Mo, a stratagem that relies on psychological factors to win. Now get this. Look at this number, 9. That's how many times the Chinese word for force even appears in Sun Tzu's entire book, just 9 times. That tells you everything you need to know about how low a priority brute force was for him. And now for the punchline. 8. That is how many times Clausewitz uses the German word for force in just the 2 paragraphs where he defines what war is. I mean, the gap between them is just staggering. For one guy, force is an afterthought. For the other, it's the entire point. This massive difference even extends to how they viewed information. Clausewitz was famously skeptical about intelligence. He understood the fog of war, this idea that in the chaos of battle, most information is going to be wrong, contradictory, or just plain false. You just can't rely on it. But Sun Tzu's entire system is built on the complete opposite assumption. For his psychological tricks and deceptions to work, you need what we'd now call intelligence dominance. You have to know your enemy better than they know themselves. His whole strategy is impossible without the very thing that Clausewitz basically dismissed as useless. So we have these 2 completely different strategic worldviews. How can we possibly tie it all together? Well, there's one final analogy that I think makes it all crystal clear. Let's try to actually visualize this. Just imagine for a second that you could plot the flow of a conflict on a graph over time. So on this graph, that moving line represents your potential for success. As time goes on, things change. The situation becomes more or less favorable. It rises up to these peaks of perfect opportunity, and then it falls down into these valleys of danger. And this, right here, is the key takeaway. Sun Tzu is what you could call a differential strategist. Now, don't worry about the math. In simple terms, he's looking for the slope of the curve. He is searching for that one perfect moment, the very peak of the graph, where a single action will have the absolute maximum effect. But Clausewitz, he's an integral strategist. He couldn't care less about one perfect moment. He's looking at the total area under the curve. He believes victory comes from applying constant cumulative pressure over the entire duration. For him, it's the sum of all your efforts that matters. And so that leaves us with one last question for you to think about. In the challenges you face in your own life, big or small, which one are you? Are you a Sun Tzu, the strategist of the perfect moment, waiting for that one single opportunity to strike? Or are you a Clausewitz, a strategist of cumulative effort, believing that victory is won through relentless, sustained pressure over time? There's no right answer, of course, but knowing the difference, well, that's the first step to mastering any strategy.